Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment. And it is such a great honor and privilege that you have clicked that button and said, "Talk to me." Um, we are here today with John Opalewski and a surprise guest. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Jim. It's good to be with you. I can't believe we're on 164.
Wow, it makes
Uh,
me feel old.
it really
164.
does. It really
Yeah,
does.
yeah. It feels like dog years, or something like that. Like it shouldn't. It's going faster than it should in some ways. Who you got with
Yeah.
you here today?
We have a very special guest with us today. Jaime Hlavin is our guest on today's podcast, episode 164. Jaime has been a good friend of Laura and mine for, let's see, probably a good 25 years now.
Wow.
And
Multiple decades.
Right. I think the first time I met Jaime, I may still have had some hair. It's been that long.
No comment.
Um, but we're so delighted to have you with us today, Jaime. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm just trying to convince myself that this is a conversation just between the three of us and that nobody
Yeah,
else is going to hear it or see
just
it.
yeah.
So that helps
It really is. It's just the three of us and the thousands of people listening all over the world. But just ignore them. Just ignore them. This is for us. It really is.
So, Jaime, when we have guests on the podcast, we're always interested to hear their story of how they came to Jesus. And I wondered if you could give us your story, how you came to know the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share that. I love telling that story. It's a pretty remarkable God ordained thing, obviously, as all stories of coming to Christ are. But I'll go back a few years and start off by saying that my mom found out she was pregnant with me when she was 17 years old. She was a senior in high school. So, it was kind of a life altering time for her. I mean, as finding out you're pregnant usually is, but when you're a senior in high school, even more so. So after the immediate freak out, she and my father decided to make it work. They decided to obviously give birth to me and get married and attempt to raise me as very young parents. And the first years, almost decade, was tumultuous, as it wasn't smooth sailing necessarily. There were a lot of bumps in the road, and it was pretty rough for them over those early years. Definitely not a walk in the park. And I remember that I was probably 8 or 9 years old. It was the summer of, well, I'm not going to tell you what summer it was. I don't want all of our thousands of listeners to know.
2010, I believe it was the summer of 2010.
Summer of 2010. My grandmother on my father's side had recently accepted Christ as her savior, and she had begun going to an Assembly of God church. She lived in the Thumb area. If you're from Michigan, if you know, she lived near Harbor Beach, and so she was attending an Assembly of God church there. And my parents were recovering from a fairly difficult time in their relationship, and we're trying to make some things work. So they sent my brother and I to stay with my grandmother that week. And we attended a VBS type program during the week. And I remember an altar call was given, the invitation to accept Christ was given, and I went forward and accepted Christ as my savior. And then when I came home later that week, my brother and I came home, my mom sat us down on the couch. She said, "Guys, I need to tell you something. Something happened to me while you guys were at grandma's house." And we're thinking, "Oh my goodness, what life-altering thing?" Well, yes, another life-altering thing. She said, "I was watching TV and a man on the television named Jim Bakker told me how to give my life to Jesus, and I did that." And my brother and I were like, "Oh yeah, we did that too." So it was just really cool the way God was working, hundreds of miles apart, in separate parts of the state, all to, make everything come together. And over the years, we kind of grew up as a family in faith. My dad eventually started coming to church. And again, it wasn't always smooth sailing. And to be honest, I did struggle to make my faith my own into my teen years. And then probably it was my senior year of college, through a pretty supernatural experience, pretty elaborate story that I won't get into right now. You got another one, and God, I guess, has to do that to get my attention.
Yeah.
But I recommitted my life to Christ when I was 21 and never looked back. So that's my
Wow.
story.
I love that. One of the things we say here is we ask two questions, and that is, what did God save you from? The second one that we always like, especially for Christians to ask people who just recently came to faith, is, what do you believe God saved you for?
Mhm.
And I know since that commitment, in your senior year of college, so many things. You went from the receiver to the giver. You went from the child to the mother. You went from the single to the wife. You went from your ministry gifts grew. So what happened since then? I know you guys have been in a lot of roles of ministry, but just
Yeah.
tell us about that journey. I think it helps too when people are listening. You're like, oh, she's been in youth ministry. She knows the language.
Yeah.
She's not some scholar that read about it. She's been through the trenches of it. So tell
No,
us what's happened since then.
I'm definitely, it was my senior year in college. I actually went to Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. So I'm definitely not a Bible scholar. My degree was in communications. So, and I felt like from that point on, from the age 21 on, God had me kind of on this crash course of, I had this plan for your life, and even though you weren't exactly following it, I'm going to kind of fast
Yeah.
forward here. So
Yeah.
a few years after I recommitted my life to the Lord, my husband Aaron and I reconnected, and he felt a call to ministry, and we have been we were in youth ministry for 6 years. Actually, we were John's kids' youth pastors for for a bulk of that
Yes.
time.
Uh,
The boys were
Yes.
part of our
I have a
youth.
little story I want to tell. I want
Yeah.
to, when you're finished with this, I have a story about that.
I'm
and
so
pictures too. He's going to show pictures.
so scared. Yeah, so we were in youth ministry for about 6 years, and then after that, Aaron was the associate pastor at the church we ministered at. So he did that for about 4 years, and then we were lead pastors for about 13 years up until May of 2021. So I don't know if you want me to tell you about what we're
And
currently
then
doing.
you resigned from ministry at that point, and
No. we were my husband was elected to a role in our denomination, our fellowships network. We are part of the Assemblies of God Michigan Ministry Network, and at that point in time, the lead role of that is called superintendent, and he was elected to that role. And so we resigned ministry at the church we served at and stepped into a different role, and that one's a pretty complicated role, but essentially what we do is he is over, for lack of a better word, the 250 plus churches in our network, 850 plus credential holders, ministers, global workers in our network. And by over, I just mean he resources, casts vision for our network, connects with, provides support for churches, that type of thing, steps in times of transition and crisis and all of that.
So Jim, the story I wanted to tell, Jamie and Aaron, you need to know how much of troopers they really are. They agreed many years ago. Laura and I went on a trip to Cabo San Lucas, and Jamie and Aaron agreed to watch our four boys for an entire week.
Oh,
And if you know
yeah.
my boys, they're wonderful kids, but they were like energetic.
They were good. They were really good. They were
They
really
were
good.
good.
And we'll never
Uh,
forget that, that we that they agreed to take that on, and they went up several notches in
I'll
our
bet.
view after
In your eyes,
surviving.
I don't know if we went up any notches in the boys' eyes. So we may have been, I don't know, we may have slid down a
Uh,
few.
So
Four
Jamie,
boys.
uh, a while back, you wrote some content for
Mhm.
the Converge Coaching blog about survival tips
Mhm.
for introverted leaders. And that came out, I think that the blog came out last week. And man, what a hit. It was so well received, so many readers. And I thought, man, we should bring it to the podcast audience. And I'd love for you to start with some myths that people have about introverts.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think the reason it got so much traction is because all the introverts felt seen. They were very, they're like, oh,
Yes.
yes, I hear that. I hear that. Okay, so let's talk about some of these myths. The first one that I have, well, obviously, I'm an introvert, or else I would not have felt comfortable writing that blog. So, one of the myths that I have felt that I've helped bust over the years of my introversion is that introverts hate people. We can't stand the human race. We don't want to be around people. If we could just, live in a hole at all points in time, we would do that. That's not necessarily true.
Not necessarily true.
That's
In
not
all
true.
cases.
In all cases, across the board, introverts don't hate people. They love, actually, they're people, their group of people. They tend to have smaller circles of friends, not a huge vast array. They're not, walking into the party in the center of attention and the life of the party kind of thing. They'll have a smaller group of friends that they love very deeply and are committed to. They're very loyal. And so those friendships tend to run very, very strong and very deep. I tell people, it's not that I hate being around you all. I love you dearly, and I'm having a great time while I'm in this group of people in this group setting, but I'm just going to need a nap afterwards. So that's generally how I tell people, explain introversion. It's like, I love you, but you wear me out.
Can I ask you a quick question about that first myth? Is that the number one thing that came to mind because people said, "Oh, Jamie's not a friendly person," or "Jamie doesn't like people." They misunderstood your introversion. It hit their insecurities, and their conclusion was it's Jamie's problem that she has with me. Is that true?
Maybe that, because I feel like, I'm married to an extrovert, and I feel like he's best friends with everybody. And then I had my mother-in-law was an extrovert as well, so she never, met an acquaintance. Everybody was her best friend. So I think that standoffishness that was perceived came across as she doesn't like people. Or an odd thing would happen if I did well in social settings where I was talkative, or I could hold my own with the extroverts. I'd say something about being an introvert, and people would say, "Oh no, don't say that about yourself, you're not an introvert," as if it was
right.
something that's conflicted with,
It's evil, right?
Right. "Oh, don't say that about yourself. That's not nice." Fine, really.
Yeah, right.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and that's why there's no support groups for introverts, because they don't really want to be around each other. So
we want to do it.
Yeah.
Zoom support groups are great, alone in our house, right?
Right.
So good. And so, Jamie, you've got another one here. Why don't you give us myth number 2?
Yeah, that we don't play well with others, and we're socially awkward. So again, that goes back to, the whole, we prefer to have smaller groups. And again, I think one thing I wanted to point out, a common misnomer about introverts is that it's that we don't want to be around people, that we don't like, that we're socially awkward, we don't play well with others. And it's not that. It's the difference between introversion and extroversion is where you draw your energy from.
Right.
I think extroverts feel energized after being around large groups of people and a lot of activity and social events. Introverts did okay in those situations, and they love being around their people, but they need that time alone. They need that replenishing activity, that whatever, to recharge, to get their energy back. As far as not playing well with others and being socially awkward, again, it goes back to the small groups of people. I think when you get really close to an introvert and you're in that small group or that one-on-one setting, you'll find that an introvert's actually very discerning, insightful, observant, and humble.
Are you allowed to say that about yourself? One of my benefits, I'm just really humble.
I just thought that would be funny to tack on the end of all of those really great attributes, because we're just kind of observing the situation. And honestly, some of the funniest people I know are introverts, because
Yes.
you're in this group and it's this small interaction going on one-on-one, and the jokes can get heard. It's not overpowered by all the extroverts in the room. And I think that social awkwardness that's perceived comes from the fact that small talk isn't easy. So, we don't necessarily love, hey, this is great weather we're having. Oh, it's really dark early now. Oh, where do you come from? All of the small talk stuff is really grueling for us to have
I'm,
to
I'm
trudge.
laughing because I've literally had those conversations with strangers in the last week. Those
Yes,
exact phrases. Like,
yes,
hey, it's
yes.
getting dark. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And if the stranger you were talking to was an introvert, they were screaming inside while you were having that conversation with them. I'm
uh,
just telling you.
do you think part of
Jamie,
that is,
go ahead, Jim.
I mean, like some people are external thinkers.
Mhm.
Silence is awkward. Some people are internal thinkers. Silence is golden. And I really don't know what I'm thinking until I hear myself say it. I have to verbally process things. Whereas I'll talk to people and say, "What do you think about this?" They'll go,
Give me 3 days.
Like, what are you doing? Wait,
Process.
did you hear what I said? Are you trying to like just work with me? And they're like, I am. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, why would you do
Mhm.
that? Why would
Yeah.
you do it that way? You know?
Yes.
So God creates us all differently. Can you imagine if
Very
you're all extroverts? It'd be like somebody threw a fox into a chicken coop. There'd be no rhyme or reason and a bunch of noise. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
you talk about in the article not just the myths, but
Mhm.
you also got into the kind of I'm trying to the survival tips.
Survival tips.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I
There-
think what you're saying, just if I could recap it a bit, we're not talking about overcoming a handicap.
Right.
We're talking about being effective
Mhm.
as God has made you,
Mhm.
not isolating yourself because they're just scary, loud,
Mhm.
but saying I have a role in
Yeah.
the conversations around me, but because it's a little bit harder for me because of the way God's designed me, I have some ideas, and I know you being married to, you said an extrovert. I think he's a quadruple extrovert. He's like you're saying, everybody's his best friend, and you're going to be standing there on his arm. He's going to do 90%, I would imagine, of the talking
Mhm.
in a strange environment. So give us some of your survival tips. What do you do when you're married to an extrovert, or you're the world around you is extroverted and you're an introvert?
Yeah, well, first of all, I like what you said there. I do feel like it's part of obviously the way God made me, and the attributes I have as an introvert are gifts
Right.
that I bring to the body of
Yeah.
Christ. Like I said, that oftentimes introverts are very insightful. They see things that other people don't see because they're paying attention to the details, because they're not distracted by all of the activity and the extroversion that's going on around them. So,
Yeah.
they can kind of pick up on the nuances of conversations and situations and things like that. But yeah, so I like what you said there. But anyway, one of the first survival tips that I talk about in my blog was to, when you're in a situation like that where you're either leading an event, an activity, or a service, if you're in ministry or that type of thing, I think it's important that over the course of that stretch of time that you're leading is to make time for one-on-one interaction in that group setting. Take time to kind of break away and have one-on-one conversations with people. It doesn't have to be all speaking from the stage or large groups, but just those small, like little recharge bits where you can take time to break away. And I think, another myth that comes into play is that because we're introverted, we can't be good leaders because we're not, good at being in the spotlight or running the show. But the thing about introverts is we tend to draw teams around us. We're good at team building because we find people that are good at complementing our strengths and filling in our weaknesses, and they tend to be very loyal to us because they know we care deeply about them. So in those situations, that first survival tip is to find time for one-on-one in the group, the big event, the big thing.
Hey, Jamie, can I just interject there? Because what you just said, I think needs to be said again.
Mhm.
That this myth of introverts not being able to be effective leaders.
Mhm.
We've worked with pastors now for well over 15 years. I'm shocked how many pastors are introverts.
Yes,
Um,
that's something I've noticed in this role that we're in too, as we get to connect with people and travel the state and the country. And as I'm talking to people and I start talking about my own introversion, it's just this like sigh of relief that people are like, oh my goodness, it's so good to know there's more of us out there. You know?
yeah,
Uh,
and
Solidarity.
right, and the way that I've kind of got my mind around this is when I tell people I'm shy,
Mhm.
they're all shocked.
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
that I'm a shy person. I'm an introverted person, but I have a very extroverted role.
mhm.
mhm.
And so I can't use my introversion as an excuse.
Mhm. Yeah.
In an I if you're a pastor, you're in the people business, right?
Mhm.
It's all about people. And so I can't use my introversion as something I hide behind and say, well, I don't like being around people because I'm an introvert. No,
Right.
that's not how it works. You turn on the extrovert. You
Yeah.
learn how to turn that on. That's not fake.
Mhm,
It's not disingenuous. It what it is you stepped into the role and
mhm.
you turn that on because people need you to interact with them. Now, when that's all done, like you said, nap time, right? After or please, nobody talk to me. Nobody talk to me for the next
Oh,
3 hours. I
oh
don't
my
want to
word.
process any
No more words.
external stimulation. Um,
Mhm.
but
Um,
I do think that maybe some who are listening or watching today may feel disqualified
Yeah.
in some sense, right? Because I don't have the big personality. I just don't have that extroverted bent in my life. And I think nothing can be further from the truth that if you're introverted, God can use you in powerful
yeah,
ways. And so don't discount yourself, don't devalue yourself because you have this particular personality trait.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't necessarily have sound theological basis for this, but all through the
Thank
nest.
you. Thank you for preempting it.
Yeah. So this isn't borderline heresy or anything like that. But all through the New Testament, you see Jesus, he's interacting with the huge crowds and healing people and doing just the work of the ministry. But he escapes to be alone. I mean, he goes off in the boat. He's taken a nap in the boat. He goes off and the people still find him. He went off to pray. He goes, to the garden alone or with just his group of his disciples, his friends there. And he had that small group of friends, that he poured into with regularity. So I don't know, maybe Jesus was an introvert. I'm just saying.
I was thinking as you were talking about that just earlier. I thought I wonder who was extroverted in the Bible, or introverted rather. And I think we can all agree probably Peter was an extrovert. He
Yeah.
seems to be the first one out of the boat, the first one to say something. But John, I don't think was.
Mm-mm.
I think Barnabas probably was more introverted than Paul's extroverted.
Now again, I'm not saying Jesus was an introvert. That's probably just something I'm saying to, comfort
Yeah,
myself, make myself
because I
feel
see
better.
Jesus as an extrovert, but I think there has to be a balance, right? There's no such
Mhm.
thing as an extrovert that doesn't need to stop, or an introvert that doesn't need to go.
Right, right.
They're both necessary, and maybe the challenge of an extrovert is to stop, and the challenge of an introvert is to go. But
Mhm.
I'll tell you this: you talk about leaders, John, being introverted. An extrovert will talk when there's nothing really to talk about, and his words are, as the average man speaks 10,000 words. I'm known to have gusts up to 30,000 words a day, just because I'm fishing, But when an introvert speaks, the whole room watch them. The whole room will listen, because they
Yes.
only speak if they have something to say.
Right,
Versus
right.
we're uncomfortable with the silence, so we continue to talk.
It's
Yeah.
true. It's true. What's that one proverb? It's my favorite proverb about in many words there's sin. So you've got to
Yeah,
careful.
Better,
where words are many, sin is not absent.
yeah,
That's how that
better,
went.
better to hold your tongue and let the world think you're an idiot than to open your mouth to remove all doubt. That's a paraphrase of another proverb, but that as well is proverbial.
So Jamie, you had another survival tip for introverted
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
you
And
speak to that?
this one's just kind of a practical thing that I was actually talking to an extrovert friend of mine and just lamenting the fact that I have had countless, like, just mortifyingly awkward exchanges because small talk is hard. So as I'm getting to know somebody in a long situation, a new hairdresser or something like that, where you're kind of like forced into conversation I've got a lot of hair, so that's like a long period of
So
time.
you had to use that example with John and I, a new hairdresser. Do you think that's applicable?
I don't know. It's just, or
it's just mean.
anything.
It's just cruel.
always with the hair. But I just, I've had several strange encounters where I've been required to have lots of small talk, and I just don't know how to do it. So strange conversation topics, I'll just pluck from the back of my brain of like the weird bits of knowledge I know, and then I just go with it, and it's like this ball starts rolling, and again inside I'm just screaming, be quiet, they don't care about this. So I was telling my extrovert friend about this, and she says, I have a little tip for you. She said, keep a list in your phone of small talk topics. And, if you're going into a situation where you're getting to know someone for the first time, pull the note up on your phone, take a quick peek, a quick review of it, so that you've got some, topics just to chit chat about right off the bat. And it kind of like smooths things over. So, you don't have to, rely on the weird information you have about cults and cult leaders in your head to drive the conversation. But and then maybe even take it a step further after that conversation. If it's somebody you're forming a relationship with, a connection with, or networking with, follow up and keep another note in your phone about that person of the things you learned through the small talk. So just a little practical tip there for those who struggle with the small talking.
What do you think about, like, an introvert just asking interesting questions that then the person has to? Is it the problem, I don't want to hear people talk, or is it that the awkwardness of conversation is painful? Because can you say, so how long have you been doing here? Where did you learn that? I mean, these are 5-word questions. They can go off on for 10 minutes.
Open-ended questions, because if the questions are yes or no, then you're, as the introvert, you're stuck like referring to your note, or looking down at your phone. Okay, next question. But those good open-ended questions that kind of like generate dialogue. And then
do you have any kids? How old are they? All that's nice. That kind of, like, they're doing 80%, 90% of the talking now, it seems. Is that painful to an introvert, or is that?
No, that's not. When you kind of preface things with, tell me about, because then that kind of puts the onus back on them to keep the conversation going. And then, and again, that kind of adds to that quality of introverts, where we're observant and we're learning the information, and we're, keeping track of the details of the situation. So that's good.
Well, Jamie, we'd like to continue to talk about this subject, but we're out of time for today's podcast. Jim, would you, well, first of all, Jamie, would you join us for another one?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
We can chit chat in between if you like, and just kind of have some small talk.
I'm going to take a nap.
Jamie, thank you, because I think what you're saying about who God made you to be and the effectiveness of that is helpful to people that look in the mirror and believe less. And maybe there's a season in your life where you said, what am I doing here? I'm not equipped for this, or I'm not qualified for this, because I'm not, something that the expectation would be. And I like it when you say, I'm very much a partner in ministry, in churches, in my marriage, in my family, and who I am is valuable, and God is using me. But I am different than an extrovert. A D or an I or an S or a C, and the DISC assessments there. Not one is wrong, and four, are right. It's everybody is what God made them to be. So thank you so much for sharing who you are. I think it's helpful to people that feel like they have to hide behind or make up this persona, and that's hypocrisy, right? That's Hippocrates, an actor. So being who you are is great. So God bless you. Thanks for doing that, and God bless you, our listeners and watchers, for being a part of this today. If you are thinking, man, I'd like to talk more about this, you can go to convergecoach.com/links. Is that right? Did I get that right, John? That's a lot of words for me.
Contact us.
Yeah. I did that on purpose so people would hear it, from you, and it would be more impactful. Probably not true, but I want you to know something. Like, we are cheering, praying, rooting for your success. We I think as Bob Mumford said, our fruit grows on other people's trees. And I like that picture that what we're doing is helping, cultivating, watering, pruning, protecting, weeding. And we are here because that's where God has placed us. Converge Coaching is here for you. So God bless you, and may this day be blessed. It's Tuesday. You didn't quit. Congratulations. One more week in the books. Another new week starting. So we will talk to you again soon as you continue to lead from alignment.